We are live, and just to give a background, it was awesome because Christine just said we were talking about the movie Aaron Brockovich, and she threw some crazy chemical out. What did you say?
Hexavalent chromium. That's the chemical from the movie.
Hexavalent chromium?
Hexavalent chromium.
I'll take your word for it. And I said, is that what was inside Aaron Brockovich? And she said, no, it was confidence. And that's what we're rolling with tonight. So I literally, for our viewing audience out there, and those of you who watch back, I was literally typing. I still have it on my screen. I will read it to you. That's how authentic this is. It says, hello, everyone. I hope you had a wonderful Sunday. Education today seems to shift on a dime, and many of our team have some unexpected shifts today between work or travel issues or personal issues that they are not able to make it. So we're going to push off our discussion. We will not be on tonight, and we're sorry for the short notice, but we wanted to reach out as soon as we had the confirmation. And I was literally going to hit send, and Christine said, oh, I'm going to be on tonight if you want me to join in. And I was like, ooh, we were thinking of not having it. And she said, let's do it. So she's bringing the confidence and all of her skills. And we welcome any questions you have in the chat. So when I brought up, and then we're like, what are we talking about? And so I said, well, the topic was around growth, student growth. We were heading into spring, and what are we going to do to ensure growth? A little bit of play on words for spring and growth of new flowers or whatever. And the first thing that Christine said was, well, for students to make growth, teachers need to make growth. So what did you mean by that? Let's dive into that.
Well, what I meant by
it. Time out, first of all, before we get started, because I know who you are, and you've actually popped on a couple times, but for those who watch back or are watching live, give a little backstory.
All right, so I am Christine Ravesi Weinstein. I live in Massachusetts. I'm a high school assistant principal, sort of like west of Boston in a suburb. I've been doing that for a couple years. I was a science department chair, hence the understanding of hexavalent chromium. And I was a classroom science teacher for 15 years. My passion work is mental health advocacy. So you probably see a lot of my work on Twitter, all about being able to take the risk, because what if it turns out right? And so I like to give voice to students with anxiety and support the teachers in supporting the students. And I wrote my first book with Times 10 Publications. It's called Anxious, just like a little like self-promotion. Here's the book right here. And so that came out last March, just as the pandemic began. And I was recently signed by Codebreaker to write my second book, which we don't have a specific publishing date, but I'm working on it right now. And it's all about fighting your inner voice. So ironically, we started out talking a little bit about confidence in Erin Brockovich, who is my all-time favorite female lead in any movie. And I used to show it in my science classes. And I used to always tell my kids that she is the woman I wish I could be, just because she's beyond confident. And I think it's pretty extraordinary. So the book is going to be telling my story of fighting my inner voice, but I'm also adding the stories of other educators and their personal journeys with fighting their own voice. So it's becoming a much larger project than I thought in terms of how deep it is for me. So I'm really excited to be able to finish that project and sort of share it with the world. So that's
yeah, and that's gonna be awesome. I'm super excited to see it and read it and see it come to life, because some of the things I've seen you do, bringing people together, and I think this is great to have you on chatting with us tonight, is about overcoming some of that, inner voice of learning as an educator. Because one of the things that I had found, I actually just ran a professional development on Friday. I ran a half-day PD, and it was kind of strange, where I was in the high school auditorium and our elementary staff was in their building and the middle school staff was in their building, and I was trying to model kind of the live remote teaching live. Yeah. Granted, I hope no one ever had, and that's the first thing I said, if you have a class of 150 kids zooming in and 75 in front of you, just quit. Like, find another job. Like, don't do this every day. But we tried to model it. But one of the things I really I found was that teachers were having a hard time having that personal growth. Like, this is a new year for everybody. And
Yeah. So it like kind of jumps back to the first question you had, like, what did I mean when you said like we want to talk
yeah,
about?
so that was kind of your lead into
Yeah.
that.
So I want to bring people back to, the first interview I had for becoming a department head. So I worked my first 15 years in the same school district and really had no anticipation that I would ever leave that school district. I'm a really committed person. And the fact that I ended up leaving is, another whole podcast. But when I decided to
I
make,
think that's a mini series.
yeah, it's probably a mini series.
We used to work together in Attleboro, so we know kind of some of the same
Yeah, we know
players.
some of like the players, and while those players impacted your kind of moving on, although they're not all the same players, I had a similar experience. So we'll have to do a second episode of Christine and just talk about that. But so I had taught for 11 years, and the job opened up, and I really had to, I mean, interviews are interviews in that, some of the questions you're going to get, they're the same regardless of the position you're applying for, at least in the world of education. And you can, like, to some extent kind of like force your way through it by knowing enough to like use the right words and stuff. But for me, I really needed to know like why do I want to do this, right? Like I can't BS my way through that. So when I thought long and hard about impact, because that's why we want to be teachers, right? Like you want to have an impact on your students. Well, in moving towards at that time, which was like a quasi-administrative role because it was a department head. So I'd still be in the classroom part-time, but I would be also leading teachers. It was evaluative. So I'd be observing teachers, that type of stuff. Like, why do I want to do this? And what I realized was at the heart of it, at the core of it, I'm still driven by impactfully changing students. That's still my
Well,
drive.
that's good. That's a good thing,
Whether I'm in
right?
the classroom, like with those kids directly in front of me, or I'm not. And so, what about this job is going to help me still accomplish that? And what'll help me accomplish that is by making a change in teachers' lives. Because, as a classroom teacher, I'm the leader in my room. So I have an impact on, let's say, 75 kids a day. That's what it was at that time because we have block scheduling, right? But as a successful administrator, if I can impact 5 teachers even, and then they each have 75 kids, then I'm impacting, what is it, 5, carry the 2, 30,
So you can tell us all about the chemicals, but the
right.
math piece of this is getting tricky now. I see.
Yeah. So like it becomes sort of this much greater gain. I can impact more students' lives by impacting the adults in their classrooms, right? And that's what I mean by, if you want to talk about student growth, you have to talk about teacher growth, because if our teachers don't grow, our students are never going to grow. And this year, there's been growth for sure. It's not the growth we might have
And it's
expected.
probably not straight up. It's all over the
The
place.
growth that our teachers have made this year is growth that you can't quantify, right? It's this qualitative growth. It's the ability to handle adversity, and a teacher's ability to handle adversity when modeled for students allows for students to grow and be able to handle adversity. And these are things that aren't necessarily standards. They're not check boxes, but I actually believe that the growth that we've gained this year is going to be longer lasting than the typical curricular growth that we might have in any given year. I tell people all the time, when you think about school, right? Whether you're an elementary school teacher, middle school teacher, a high school teacher, and you think about it now as an adult, like what do you remember? I don't remember crap about the curriculum I learned. Like I don't, right? Like I took BC calculus and got a 4 on the exam. I don't even remember what a derivative is. I don't have a
BC. I don't
clue.
even know what that means.
There's like 2 levels of calculus. There's like AB, which is still really good in honors. And then there's like super honors, which is BC.
Gotcha.
That's what I took.
And
So
that's different than AP.
it is an AP course, but it's like it's like harder. It's more material faster, I guess, than like the regular.
Great. So you don't remember that though.
The point is I don't remember any of the curriculum. What I remember about high school and the rest of my schooling is I remember moments, right? I remember interactions with teachers. I remember obviously funny moments. I think about like I actually think about my growth. Like I think about like me as a freshman, which is horrifying and will keep you up at night. And then I think about like me as a senior, which is still terrible, but not as terrible, right? But like I see the actual growth in me. I see how quiet I was as a freshman and how I became a little more confident as a senior. And so, you know, that's what we've got to get teachers to focus on, that it's the life experiences that we need them to work on for our students, because those are the lessons that they're going to take with them. I mean,
Absolutely. And I think when they own that,
who cares, right?
right, and when they own that growth, and I think, thinking back to some of the growth that I made as a student, it was more when I found I didn't want to miss out. So in high school, and I'm sure my mother can confirm all of this, I could just do enough to get by, like whatever, show up, get enough, get
Right.
into school, never do my homework. And then when I got into college, the growth wasn't that I didn't get smarter necessarily, but I didn't want to miss out on what was there. So I learned how to adapt and grow as both a student, and what happened when I went to Springfield was as a leader as well, that we found things that fed our own growth. And I think that's what I want to jump into today. Like, what's feeding our growth? Like for me as a younger student, it was collaboration. It was working with other people. It was going to, we had what was called leadership training conferences and different things that we learned as a collective group. And it's interesting, at 20, I did those things. And at 49, I'm planning the leadership lounge to do the exact same things. that style of growth, of bringing together educators here as well on Sunday nights, is actually how I learn from other people. Like that's my learning style, bringing people together, finding ways to get people. Tomorrow night is the educator lounge. We're bringing teachers together. Like I learned so much from that. And what have been some things that you've done this past year that have helped your growth, or you've seen other teachers grow as well? Because I know you not only have your own, but you supervise educators.
I supervise educators and work with them. It's actually funny you asked that, because just recently I was talking to a colleague, and in my current job, because unfortunately, like once you're the science girl, you really can't shake it as much as I want to. So in my current position, I'm assigned observations of a majority of the science department, right? And so like it kind of bugs me, because I'm not just the science chick, but like whatever, I'll embrace that to some extent, because there's a comfort level there, because it's what I've done before. I did make a comment to a colleague that like I'm really proud of the work that I've done with that group this year. And what I'm proud of is that they're seeking me out to have conversations about things they want to try. And to me, that's the ultimate form of teacher growth, right? Because it's not growth that you're requiring, right? It's not growth because there's something written in evaluative feedback that says you must do this. It's growth because there's a degree of comfort these teachers now have, that when we talk together, it's a collaborative endeavor. This isn't me trying to like give you a grade on your teaching. This is me trying to help you reflect and grow as an educator with support, right?
And that's critical.
Yeah, and that's beyond critical, because they know like, yeah, we're gonna write up an observation, yeah, we're gonna do a summative report, whatever, but nothing in those actual written pieces of material that the district has is their surprise, because we've talked about all these things along the way. And I'm really proud of what I've been able to accomplish with them. Something so simple. I went into a classroom a couple weeks ago, and it was a formal observation. The teacher knew I was coming in. We're in a synchronous hybrid model. So she's got 8 kids in front of her, and she's got another, I don't know, 15 kids or something around that, let's just say, at home on Zoom, that are like zooming in live, and the internet goes out midwest.
Nice. They need a
Right?
tech guy.
They need a tech guy. And
Or
so,
girl.
or girl. And so, this is a second year teacher. Okay. Her first year was the COVID year. So she's not taught a full year yet, right? Because she finished in March last year. So we didn't even get to go through a full evaluative cycle. I had some criticisms of her last year, professional criticism of her last year. And so if I'm her, I'm panicking. Like I am beyond panicking. Like my evaluator's in the room. I just lost all my kids at home. The assignment we're doing is on the internet. Like, what am I supposed to do? And the manner in which she just, and we spoke about it afterwards, and she admitted that she was quite nervous about what was going on, but the manner in which she just laughed about it in front of the kid, like she used aspects of like, this is funny, like this stinks, but
Right.
it's
There's no,
like, what am I supposed to do about it? Right. Like,
right. Owning the situation.
right. Like I'm confident that my evaluator is not going to dock me because of something that I have no control over. But once she got everything up and running, right, she's got kids in her room. So she's still masked, right? Because she's got kids in front of her and she's on Zoom and she's muted and she doesn't realize it.
Oh no, this poor teacher.
See her mouth moving. So she's talking, and all of a sudden she's like, oh my God, I'm muted.
And you're still in the room.
Yeah, and I'm still in the room. And she starts reading the live chat. Kids are like, Miss, I'm not sure because I can't see your mouth, but I think you might be muted. Like, it was just so sweet. And my point is that in supporting her and allowing her the ability to take risks and not worrying about the outcome, just worrying about the process. When she was thrown an intense curveball in the middle of a formal observation, she handled it like a vet. She really, really did.
Nice.
There was nothing, she didn't feel like it was going to count against her, right? And I think that those are things those kids are going to remember. They're going to remember how the teacher was muted with a mask on one day and how she handled that situation. They're not going to remember that they were learning about how to determine, average atomic mass. Who cares, right?
Right.
And that's what we've got to be able to do for each other. And to be honest, that's how I learn best. That's how I grow, is by taking sort of a deep breath and just realizing like perfection is not possible, but seeing that in others and seeing others embrace that like she did.
No, absolutely. I see that as a roadblock a lot with teachers, that perfection is the enemy of good, where they put so much into one thing. And unfortunately, our standardized assessments are very similar. We put all the stock into one day. And I think that sadly, that mentality doesn't foster growth. So it's almost been 13 months in a pandemic for you. And I know you were somebody who would go to events and read and learn. What are some ways you have grown, or ways you could recommend to other educators to grow outside of just your internal school building?
So like professionally growing, I'm assuming is what
Yes.
Yeah. So Twitter's been huge. Like, yeah, I just really don't think we can underestimate the power that Twitter can have on people, right? Like obviously my PLN is based on education because that's my profession and that's what I deal with. So the people I'm engaged with are educators. So I can't speak for like other, professions and whether or not Twitter is helpful, but just listening to other people's stories, right? And giving myself grace and connecting with people online has really, in some ways, made this the best year, right? Because if not for COVID, you get so hung up on your school and what you've got to accomplish. And you're literally going like, as a high school administrator, you're literally going from like one event to the next event, to the next event, to the next event, like for kids, right? Like you got prom, you got this, you got that. And all that has gone out the window. And so there's time now to forcibly focus on trying to connect with people because you're so desperate for it, that I've found connections I wouldn't have otherwise found. Twitter for me has been huge. And then, even though there's no live conferences, I've been able to like make the rounds through virtual conferences. And people have been so gracious, like just through like the chats at these live conferences and stuff. It's been an awesome experience. And, so professionally, I feel like I've learned a ton just from listening to other people's stories, and meeting people through Twitter and writing a book too. So
Absolutely. I'm just going to share something. And I don't know if this will work. I've never done it on the show before, but I'm going to share my screen for a minute, because as soon as you said that, when you were like, Twitter's been an awesome resource. I was just telling you how Friday I ran a professional development, and
Mhm.
I had never done it before. And I've done a lot of different things. And I just put the question out on Twitter, like, what would be some strategies you would tell folks? And it was amazing. I'm going to just share this, see if it works. Oh, here we go. Tell me if you see this. Can you see it?
It says you've started screen sharing, but I don't, oh, there it is. Yep, I see it.
So like and this was only half of it. These are all the folks who told me, gave me some ideas. There was 4 here, and it keeps going on. It goes down. Like, people continue to just send in ideas. And this was all within one day. I mean, you can see the time lapse after I put it up. It's like, try these things, try these things, try these things, try these things. Like
Yeah.
it's crazy that I'm going to stop sharing now. That within from the time I put it out there, I learned a ton from just other people. Really, I call it crowdsourcing. Again, you put it out there. So I've used Twitter a lot for multiple ways. One, to ask questions like that. I put out one time on Twitter. I was again, one of the episodes we talked about doing online assessments and kids at home, and our district was venturing into giving, which was the STAR assessment, which is essentially a benchmark assessment, but for our students who were at home all the time. And I didn't know how we were going to do it. And as the director of curriculum, instruction, and assessment, that was my job. How are we going to do this? So I just wrote, have a question for, whatever I've said, but I put at Renaissance, because that's the company who makes the STAR assessments. How would we do remote testing? We've only done it with kids at home. They sent me resource guides. They sent me everything just from asking the folks on Twitter. It was crazy. So that's one way. And then, and I know you do the same, but I participate in weekly Twitter chats just on a topic, and learn a lot from
Yeah, those are
different
for sure.
educators. And what that is, for those who don't know, you hear hashtags, and a hashtag essentially just is a search term. So like, even tonight it was hashtag teach pause, and it was about positive strategies to teach. And it's a couple questions, and you have a topic. You and I actually hosted a chat on confidence, ironically enough, and talked about how teacher confidence, and what happens is the host asks a question, and then the participants answer, and we just learn from those topics throughout. I just ran, last month, I think it was, I ran one with Culture Ed with a friend of mine, Mike Earnshaw, who's actually writing a book as well about culture, but we wrote on authenticity, how you can be an authentic educator. And it was great just to see those ideas come in, the questions, the answers. What have been some impactful chats for you?
Chats for me, well, I'm kind of biased. I like the code breaker chat. If anyone's ever participated in that, they ask like really strange questions,
Yeah,
but
it's different, right?
it's totally
Hey, I'm
different.
hosting this week. You better be ready.
Well, you better live up to expectation. It better be strange
Fine.
questions. But they'll ask like, I almost feel like they ask questions that a lot of teachers are starting to use now as like opening or like do now, or like those questions where like it really has nothing to do with what you might expect the class is going to be about, but it's really just to start having a discussion. Like one week the question was, do you think it would be more beneficial to start school later or end school earlier? And I was like, damn, like I don't know. Like I it's never taken me so long to answer Twitter chat questions. So that one I really I like a lot. I really like the Culture Ed chat that you run. That's a great one on Tuesdays. So is the Code Breaker one. Teach Pause is one of my like just it's so near and dear to my heart. It's so sweet. I love the group of people. They just I think that they sort of crush it. formative chat on Monday nights. I really like that one, but I have a conflict on Monday nights, and so I haven't been able to participate in quite some time.
So those, how have those helped you? Like if teachers are like, those are great, I'm going to visit these hashtags on these nights.
The way
What
it
if,
helps me is like, this is going to seem so trite, but I'm just going to be honest. Like, it just makes me feel not so alone.
no, that's not trite at all. That's perfect. That's
Like,
exactly what I want our listeners to
like,
understand.
like other educators out there that are like feeling what I'm feeling. Like, and sometimes it's just like a quick line or a perspective that like I hadn't otherwise considered. Um, no one like a lot of what we need right now aren't like big blockbuster ideas. Sometimes they're just like really small, quick reminders. Sometimes they're things you already know, but you just haven't thought about in a while. And that's what those Twitter chats do for me. I'm a huge Craig Shapiro fan. Like he's done wonders for me. He's a dear friend of mine. And so his Teach Pause chat on Sunday nights is like, you can't walk away from it not feeling positive. Like, and who doesn't need that on a Sunday night before you're about to start your work week, right? So yeah, it's like the little impact it has that can go such a long way. Just it's like a reminder, and I love that about the Twitter chats.
So no, so I definitely would rank Twitter chats, any kind of formal connection on Twitter is definitely one that I would recommend for educators who watching or watch on the replay some of the things. And I know we gear our work towards new educators, and it's been interesting that some principals have reached out that they've used this as part of their mentoring program. So what would you recommend for a new teacher who's never been on Twitter, who's never done a Twitter chat? Like what are some things that you would recommend for them to start?
Kind of like me 2 years ago.
Okay, you 2 years ago.
Remember, I had like
Yeah.
was on Twitter. I had a locked account that had like 99 followers, and I was
Yeah. Said unlock that thing. Let's go.
yeah, I unlocked it and then was like, I have no idea how to do a Twitter chat. What is this? And you were kind of walking through it.
So I know Molly and Emily aren't here tonight, but if they
Yeah.
were, or for other new educators, why and
So
where to start?
So I think the first thing to do to help new educators is give them a list of people to follow, right? So don't just be like, get a Twitter account, like they're great, because you're not going to have a clue. So give your new educators a list of impactful educators that they should follow online, and don't have them just dive into a Twitter chat. Let them, just follow these educators, spend a little bit of time every day scrolling through Twitter to see what these educators are, tweeting about, what they're a part of. And then once they've spent a couple weeks just kind of getting familiar with Twitter, I would then invite them to a Twitter chat that you're going to do. So if you're a mentor and you're mentoring a new teacher, don't just be like, hey, do the Teach Boss chat on Sunday nights at 7:30 Eastern time. Like, do it with them, right? So maybe you're available through text, however you want to do it, but you be doing the chat with them.
No, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, so that they can kind of like see how it goes. And also like tell them that for their first chat, like if they don't answer all the questions, that's okay. It's just a matter of being there and like seeing the discussion.
Yeah, that's an important point, because one of the things I hear a lot of, and not just from new teachers, from teachers who are new to something, say Twitter, the first thing I hear a lot is, who wants to hear what I have to say? I'm just I'm just a second grade teacher. I'm just a fifth grade math teacher. Who wants to hear what I have to say?
That's why it's important to do it with someone, because like if you're doing it with somebody, then your mentor can like or retweet your tweet in a chat, right? And then
Mhm.
like that helps you get a little bit more visibility. And then it's like an adrenaline rush when you get that first person that you're not really, you don't know who likes, even just likes your tweet. Like you're like,
Mhm.
oh, I guess I have something good to say. Look, the bottom line is you have no idea who is going to be impacted by your perspective. And
So true.
yes. So that's the mentality you have to have going into it. And it's something I always have to remind myself of, right? I mean, even given where I am today, I still have, and you know this, I still have a lot of moments where I'm like, what do people care about what I have to say? Like, that's just a natural, it's
Right.
self-doubt, right? but you don't know who's going to be impacted by what you have to say. And that's why it should be said, because I would like to think that as teachers, even if we can change just one person or impact just one person, it was worth it. And you also have to have the perspective, like, look, one tweet's not going to change the world. Like, most depends on who you are, right? If
True.
you're Kardashian, then you have a higher,
Maybe.
but we're not. So, what you've got to do is think about like impacting one person. If you can impact one person, then maybe that person goes on and impacts another. There was someone on the Joe Rogan podcast who said, you can't change the world, but you might be able to change your neighbor. And if you can change your neighbor, maybe you change your street. And if you change your street, maybe you change your town, city, state.
Yeah.
Like, you go from there. So you got to start small. And so starting small is, having a perspective that maybe influences one other person.
No, I think that's critical. So I know, because I've seen some of the work that you do, and I know you mentioned this earlier about attending some online events. So I want to talk about that just for a little bit, because obviously we kind of understand what it means to go to a conference. You drive in, you get a badge, you get to pick sessions, you go sit down and, you listen to a speaker. But for those new to online events, which a lot of them are free now, and I know we're doing the Power Summit coming up, and the ASCD does them, and many of the larger organizations are now doing them, and even smaller ones, like we just did an Ignite session.
Mm-hmm.
But I hear a lot from teachers I work with, or from new teachers, are like, it's so daunting, meaning like if you go to an event and you walk in and you have the brochure of where to go, you kind of have a little bit of control. When people think of online events, I think they get worried like it's going to be overwhelming. What has been your experience with online events for teachers so that they continue to attend or go and
Well,
grow? And I'm asking the woman who wrote the book Anxious. Now, mind you.
I was just going to say, you're asking the person who walked into her first live event and ended up sitting on the floor sobbing. So
Correct. So this is why I wanted to ask you, because if you can enter this world of digital events, that I think you have a great perspective for those who have both never done it and who may just shut their camera off and be like, I'm out.
look, I think you have to have a reason for everything you do. It goes back to the whole, like, what's your why, which is impactful, but like it's starting to become to a point now where nobody's caring about their why anymore because they're sick and tired of hearing about it, right? Like, but like, what do you want to get out of it? That's where the impact comes from. Okay. It's no different than a live event. You go to a live event, you see a session that sounds interesting, you walk in, you sit there and you're like, look, this session isn't for me. Like, as a presenter, it sucks when someone leaves, but I'm not going to take it personally. I'm going to be like, okay, that person's just not going to get out of this what they want. Like, go get something out of it. Like, I want you to help your kids. If this isn't going to help them, go somewhere that it will. And online sessions are the same thing, right? They're pretty straightforward. They all publish the sessions, so you see what time they are, and you just log in, and it's like a live conference. Like, I'll be presenting and I see people like, oh, okay, great, we're going to start. There's 35 people in there. Next thing I know, there's 18. I'm like, I'm sucking, but like, I don't worry about it, because like, again, if I impact one of those 18, that's great. Like, maybe they'll take something back and help a student out. Again, if something is daunting, ask someone to do it with you, right?
Yeah,
Like,
absolutely. Because a lot of these are free now. A lot of them,
it's huge.
they
Like,
want you to go in.
hey, I heard about this. It sounds great. Want to give it a whirl together? And again, like, don't ask yourself to sit at the entire virtual conference all day. That you're going to burn out. You're going to hate it, right? Pick one session, commit to one thing. Is better than nothing, right? And do that. I think people bite off more than they can chew a lot of times. They assume, like, I got to do all these. I got to sit at my computer from 8 to 4 on a Saturday. Who wants to do that? Nobody does, which is why nobody does that. They pick the sessions they want to go to.
Right, and I'm glad you went there, because that was going to be the question, the follow up of that. A lot of educators this last year have been like this online, 5 days a week. Some of the draw of the in-person conference was like, I get to leave my district, I get to leave. Oh my gosh, I get to go somewhere. And now you're going to these online events from the exact same place you've been teaching for a week, right? And it's like, it's not filling the bucket for me. And I think it's a turnoff, but like what you said is so true, that if we're talking about teacher growth and there's something that you want to see, you're talking about anxiety, I'm going to be talking about mentoring, whatever it is, that you just pick that session, you block off that time and you go and leave. And that's okay to do that, because it's for your own growth.
And again, it's like small incremental gains, right? Like for me, as someone with severe anxiety, like exposure therapy is like a very real thing in my life. You know, if I'm terrified of going to a live event, the last thing that's going to be successful is me having to go and stay the whole time. It's like go in, walk around for 5 or 10 minutes, step out, recover, go back in, you know, like that's what you have to do. Is every time you show yourself that it was worth doing, you're more likely to do it again. And so that's what you've got to prove to yourself. And
No,
mentor, that's kind of your whole job. You've got to prove to your mentee that it's worth doing for them to buy in and do it. Um, and if you're like, hey, there's this online conference on Saturday from 8 to 4, you should do it. They're going to be like, no. Great,
thank you.
because I still haven't gotten a handle on how to balance that. Now,
Right.
but if you're like, hey, I'm doing this free online conference on Saturday, there's this one really cool session that's 45 minutes. If you're around, you want to sign on together, that's way more inviting and way more likely to produce the desired outcome.
No, absolutely. And in a type of online session that I recently participated in it was an ed camp, and I had attended some in person before, and I'm like, how do these online ones work? I did one for MA leads for the Mass Association, Mass, whatever the new term is, Mass MSAA, and
Oh,
it was really neat, because it was run just like an in-person one, where they had the big board and people put up ideas of different sessions, and it was, and once I saw the big board, in a sense, what they called it, essentially it's a 5x5 grid, like these are the sessions that are at 8, these are the 9:15. I was like, okay, I came at 8, I saw the big board, 8:30. All right, the two sessions I want to go to are 9 and 11. So I did 9, pieced out for an hour, logged back in, and stayed and see if I won a prize, which I did, which was great.
awesome. Like it's really like anything. It's all about, you know, you've got to have self-care, right? And so
Right.
like you would tell someone like you would tell a first year teacher, you can't work 60 hours a week. You're going to burn out. You're going to be worse for your kids, right? If you burn yourself out like that. And so you know, you give that advice to a first year teacher. Why wouldn't you give that advice to someone who's trying to do, you know, something on their own time to get themselves better? It's like anything, you know. I'm big into running. And one of the reasons I've really started to love running. I was talking to a friend the other night and I'm like, I'm not really sure what's happened to me. Like I have like a coach now and I run hills by choice and actually enjoy it. Like what is happening? But what I realized is like, it's such a metaphor for life. Like it's wonderful. There's so much about it that you can equate to, you know, if someone's going to go out and run for the first time, you're not going to say, okay, go run 10 miles, figure it out. It's just not going to happen. You're going to
That'll
go
be the first and last time, let me tell you.
1,000%, right? Just like if you say, okay, you're a brand new teacher, you're going to be working 60 hours a week. Okay, they might give it a go.
Right.
How many weeks they're going to make it, right? Like
Not many.
you got to go out and run 10 miles. They might make 10 miles. They're not going to do it in, 90 minutes, right? Like
Right.
happen. And that's an important thing, is that we've got to understand that it's okay to take a break. It's okay to not do what you think society wants you to do. You just got to do what you need to do for you.
No, and I think I'm glad you're going there, because that's the last question. As we come up on 45 minutes, we talk about this growth, and we talk about things we need to do. And this year, it seems like we need to grow exponentially more than we would have years ago, or even a year ago. But I want you to share, and I'll share to wrap up after you. How can we have that balance where we have that, we want to have growth and drive as educators to improve. But as you started to go into, and I'm going to push you a little bit further, how do we have that growth, but not burn ourselves out?
I think we overcomplicate it. So what I think about is like a little kid, right? Um, they go through like these periods of time where they sleep a lot, right? And, I've always heard, well, they must going through a growth spurt because they're sleeping a lot, right? You can't grow unless you're well rested. It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen physiologically. It's not going to happen emotionally. And it's our biggest downfall. We think that in order to be better, we have to go harder. And it's actually the exact opposite. In order to be better, you have to take a step back. I was just talking to Craig today, and he was giving me advice about training and when I got to learn to pull back. And so he was giving me certain statistics to look at and said, like, if this statistic starts to go here, like you need to pull back. He said, what's going to happen is you're going to have a crappy run. And what are you going to tell yourself? Well, I got to go harder next time. I must not be going hard enough. But when you have a crappy run, it's not because you got to go harder. It's because you got to take some time off. You got to recover. You got to let your body rest. And it's the exact same thing with teaching. I mean, this is hard work. It's really, really hard work. And we all know that. And as much as we want to be better, we put our foot on the gas because we think that's what's going to do it, when ultimately we need to decompress and we need to put our foot on the brake. And that's the like ultimate advice that I would give. That if teachers want to grow, that's what we've got to do. And if we want our students to grow, that's what we've got to teach our students as well. Kids are so overscheduled these days.
Mm.
It's horrible. I mean, I see it constantly. My son's a hockey player, and you literally have dads like, all right, we got to go to basketball now. Like, what? Like, this kid is not happy. When does he get to just be a kid?
Right.
So I think that's our biggest fault as people, to be honest with you.
Well, I was going to put something, a lens on an idea as well, but I don't know if I could sum it up better than that. That where kids are going through a growth spurt because they sleep more. That really resonated. Like that's true, and I don't want to add anything more, because I think that is a great way to close. Is that taking care of yourself and taking care of your own well-being is actually going to make you go further. It's actually going to allow you to attend these events and be rested. It's going to allow you to go to an extra, we talked about Twitter tonight, attend these events, go to a different, webinar or ed camp because you are rested. So that is wonderful. And I want to thank you, and hopefully you get some rest, because you put in double work tonight. You usually an attendee, but came on now as a panelist. So I want to thank you for your time, your effort, and having you here. And for those of you who want to check out some of your work online, how can they do that?
Really, like, you just go to my website. It's like one-stop shopping. It's just revacyweinstein.com. Pretty straightforward. You can get to my YouTube channel from there. You can follow me on Twitter. You can see all of my publications and my vlog and all that good stuff. Just try to keep it simple, stupid, right?
There you go. I like it. Awesome. Well, Christine, thanks for jumping on tonight. For those of you who watched live time, thanks for joining. And for those who watch on repeat, make sure to share this out. Make sure to have your own growth, but also make sure to take care of you in the process. So Christine, have a great night and have a great start to your week.
Everybody.
All right. See ya.